is those practices and activities carried out by an organization with the primary purpose of identifying and attracting potential employee. So there are two basic things that you could notice. It is identifying and attracting potential employee.
Okay? Those who can be recruited to the organization, right? Selection as against recruitment is the process of choosing one candidate from a list of candidates for the desired role and level in the organization. This one can be many, but many out of many will be there. So we are saying here, it is selecting a candidate for the desired role that we are referring to as selection. The question that comes up is why careful selection is important. See, the importance of selecting right employee basically is very, very important, and organizational performance obviously will depend on how well the subordinates perform, what is the kind of skill they have, is it the right skill and attribute, and recruiting and hiring employee is of course costly, and if you are not hiring right kind of employee and they have got to leave, you are wasting lots of money of the organization.
We also find that there are legal implications of incompetent hiring. That will be there. Sometimes they go to the court and you have got to fight that out. Similarly, we also have legal requirement of
equal employment opportunities, that is selecting people from reserved categories in large number of cases. And we also find that there is the liability of negligent hiring of workers with questionable backgrounds will also be problem. How to avoid it? The first thing that we have got to do is to carefully scrutinize information supplied by the applicant on his or her employment application. This is the first thing. You must carefully scrutinize it. Normally, scrutiny is given to a junior personnel who may not be well versed with the system, and therefore they may not be able to scrutinize them well. Therefore, it is desirable that you, when you are giving the scrutiny, give it to a person who is well versed with the idea, maybe new or old, doesn't matter. Get the applicant's written authorization for references, that is reference checks that is to be done, and carefully check the references. See, a reference becomes very, very important. Even what happens that we normally get a large number of references request from different organizations about the candidates who pass out. Sometimes you do not have got to mention as to who do you want. Hang on, just a minute. So in the last number.
Yeah. So those references, when it comes, we have got to check, number one,
the person whose details are given has, first thing, they have passed out from our institution, number one.
So the records are verified from the office. Then after verification, we also get the position of that person in the total class.
The third thing is that we do remember. If we don't remember, we ask people about the background of that particular person. Not that we are going to write anything, all superlative things and all adjectives for the person. We are always very, very realistic in writing, so that if we overemphasize certain things and that doesn't prove, our credibility will be at the stake. And when I say our credibility, it means the credibility of the institution that we belong to. And therefore,
if there is anything adverse about any individual, we do not hesitate writing about it. So that is the kind of thing that is there. Therefore, references are very, very important part of one's getting a job. We also find that we have got to save the records and information you obtain about the applicant for future checking, and reject applicants who make false statement of material facts or who have conviction records for offenses directly related and important to the job in question. That is also very important. Balance the applicant's privacy rights with others. Do not disclose it to Tom, Dick, and Harry, and especially when you discover damaging information, you must not disclose it to anybody, and take immediate disciplinary action if
problem arises. That is very, very important here. Yes. Okay. There's some problem here.
Right. We also find that once all these things have been done,
we find that the tests that is given to the employee, the batteries of tests have gone through
a reliability test and a validity test. What are these? Even when you do research and develop a questionnaire or a schedule,
that needs to be checked for reliability and validity. Now, reliability is basically the consistency of scores obtained by the same person when related with the identical or equivalent tests. Now the question is, are the tests results stable over a period of time or not? It is basically referring to consistency of data that is being generated. How consistent is the data that has been generated over a period of time on the same individual, and it should not change with the time period.
Reliability is tested. Say if it is a medical science, the reliability of course would be as little as 99%.
But
for other sciences, of course, we believe that if it is more than 80%, that is fine. But normally we expect 90% reliability or 95% reliability.
That is there. But in social sciences, even 70% and above is considered to be a high reliability kind of a thing. But for selection, we are desiring 95% reliability of the test which has been administered, because 100% is absolutely difficult to achieve. Then we also find another thing called test of validity. The accuracy which a test interview and so on measures what it purports to measure or fulfills the function it was
designated to fill. Right? Does the test actually measure what we need for it to measure? Just 1 minute. There's somebody at the gate. I'm sorry. So we go through both the tests of validity and reliability, because without the test being valid and reliable, the person who are selected will not be the right kind of person. There are various types of validity that is there. The important ones are listed here. That is, first is the criterion validity, which is a type of validity based on showing that scores on the test, that is the predictors, are related to the job performance, that is the criterion. Are test scores in the class related to students' knowledge of human resource management the same as their selection or not? So what happens that criterion validity is basically when the person is selected, they are selected on a predictor that if the person scores say 80% marks in the test, we feel that the person is going to perform well, right? Or that score may be 60% even, or that score may be 90%. Because if the test relates directly to actual situation, it is not a theoretical kind of thing that when Gandhiji was born, or what is the contribution of Gandhiji to independence and so on and so forth. Not that way. Or when was demonetization done in India last time? Not that kind of a question, because if it is not related to the job, then that question is superfluous. So it has to be related to job, and if the person answers that question correctly, it is believed that he will also perform. Now, if you find that the person has scored 80%, you select that person and the person performs. What is the score of that individual as far as his performance measurement is concerned? Is he performing at the same level? Correlation has to be there, and higher, closer to 1 is the correlation, the better it is, and in no case it should be less than 0.5. So even 0.5 is an average. It has to be higher than that, close to 1 in terms of correlation that we try and do. Then we also have got content validity, which is an important kind of a validity. A test that is content valid is one that contains a fair sample of tasks and skill actually needed for the job in question. If those questions are not there, then the test is not content valid. Do the test questions in this course relate to human resource management topics? Is taking an HR course the same as doing HR? Now that can be the thing. How to validate a test? There are 3 steps given here. Analyze the job, that is based on predictors, job specifications, which is there, right? And we have got criterion, that is quantitative and qualitative measure of job success. Then second step would be choose the test or batteries of tests that has to be administered for the selection process. And third would be administer the test actually, that is concurrent validation, current employees scores with current performance, and predictive validation, where later measured performance with prior scores which are available. Now, once we are trying to do this validity and reliability, step 4 will be relate the test scores with criteria, right, and calculate correlation. Actual scores on the test with actual performance, that has to be measured for correlation. And step 5 would be cross-validate and revalidate. That is, if we find that at this step 4, the score is coming to be lower, the performance score is coming out to be lower, we say that repeat step 3 and step 4 with a different sample of employee, so that it's not that if for one sample we have got a different result, for the other test, if the result is different, then is the same, then we will say that there is some problem with the test battery. We have got to revise the test. And if it is other way around, it is coming out to be different in 2 different samples, we'll take a third sample for the same and see what is the result in the third sample. And we'll say that there was some problem with the persons from where
this sample was taken. There are large number of tests that is being given. One very popular test is called test of cognitive abilities. All of you would be knowing the meaning of the term cognitive. Here we look at the intelligence test of general intellectual ability that measures a range of abilities including memory, vocabulary, verbal fluency, and numerical ability. You might have heard of IQ test. Have you heard of IQ? Intelligence
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Intelligent question.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Here we try and measure the actual score, actual knowledge, that is the physical age of the person and the mental age of the person. So mental age is measured by that intelligence test. So we take the score on mental age, asking questions on a range of abilities, that is memory, vocabulary, verbal fluency, numerical ability, so on and so forth, and divide that by physical age of the individual, and whatever is the score, we take that in percentage terms. Is he getting a score of 40 or less? That means the person would be falling under the category of morons. If the score is above 40 but up to 60, the person will be considered as below average, and chances of getting him selected would be less, although his score can improve over a period of time. But as far as the test is concerned, the test is putting him in below average category, and nobody wants a below average person. Above 60 and up to 80 would be an average individual. They do find employment, but not in a very, very upcoming and high type of organizations where high performance work system is in operation. And those scoring more than 80 up to 100 would be considered as above average people. So that is the score that we are looking at. Most people would be falling in this particular category. Anything above 100 to 110, here the score is lower, would be intelligent people, and anything above 110 would be geniuses that is there. So depends, because normally those geniuses are not preferred because they are trouble creators in the organization because of their mental abilities. And therefore, most people, most organization would be looking at the score between 80, above 80 and below 110 that they are trying to select. And for the jobs in question, of course, the jobs will be, requirement of the job will be taken into consideration. The aptitude test, that is the test measures specific mental abilities such as inductive and deductive reasoning, that is deductive and inductive logic that is there. And they are also looking at verbal comprehension, memory and numerical ability, that is as far as the aptitude test is concerned. So this aptitude test, questions are asked on the aptitude tests, and that answered correctly will be there. Then we also have got test of motor abilities.
Test that measures motor abilities such as finger dexterity, manual dexterity, and reaction time. How well the person reacts to the situation, how fast the person is able to move
himself, or how fast the person is able to move his fingers, depending on the nature of job. Normally tested for most manual and clerical jobs. Then we also have test of physical abilities, which is needed for performing the job. Test that measures static strength, dynamic strength, body coordination and stamina of the individual for, how long can you sit. I remember recently a doctor appeared for a test for a premier institution in India, and the person qualified with top marks. In the interview, I was listening to that interview. The question was asked that how long can you sit on the chair? Right? How long? And the person replied, about 6 to 8 hours. And he was told that no, our job requirement is that you have got to sit from 8 to 12, 8 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock in the night. And if you can do that, we would be happy to take you. If you cannot, we will perhaps not select you. And this thing you have got to give in writing that you will be able to sit from 8 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock in the morning as per the requirement of the job. So that is the ability. So even not only for manual jobs, even for a mental job, you need to sit and work, then your sitting ability is tested. There are a large number of people who cannot sit for 2 hours. We don't sit on the tables and chairs and even study for 2 hours continuously. So that habit of sticking to the chair is one of the abilities that one must develop if we want to be in the profession, so that if required, we can sit for a long period of time, concentrating on the job. That stamina has to be there. Similarly, we also have test of personality, test that uses projective techniques and traits, that trait inventories, to measure basic aspects of an applicant's personality, such as introversion, extroversion, stability, motivation, so on and so forth. Now, this personality test is something which is very difficult kind of a test.
And therefore, what we find that if we are talking about projective type of tests, they are most difficult tests to evaluate and use. So evaluation normally in the personality test gets wrong. But advantage is that if it can be successfully predicted the job behavior and identify successful candidates for overseas assignments, so on and so forth.
So the thing is that once we see, I tell you my own experience vis-a-vis selection of candidates for higher education abroad. One thing that I noticed, that you might be having 99% score as far as the test is concerned. Your percentile is very high, but the problem is that still you will not be taken in the interview. The thing is that what these people look at is that until and unless the person is self-motivated, right? He is self-organized kind of a person. He may not be good enough for higher education. And therefore, although we do not consider in India that kind of a trait, personality, but the European and American universities would look at an individual who is self-organized and self-motivated person, and the person can really sit and work. That is the ability they try and test in the individual. So if you are going for any kind of an interview, then you must really try and concentrate on these points. We further find that there are tests called work sample tests. That is, actual job tasks are used in testing applicants' performance. And work sample test techniques are testing method based on measuring an applicant's performance on actual basic job tasks, the tasks that comprise the job. We also find that there are tests of work simulation, which is being measured at the
management assessment centers, a simulation in which management candidates are asked to perform realistic tasks in hypothetical situations and are scored on their performance, right? These hypothetical situations, these are basically, this can be measured through,
virtual reality, or it can be on the actual as well, depending on the nature of the task that is there. But normally it is measured on virtual reality, which is there. We also have got typical simulation exercises, or it can be done through a simulation techniques. The simulation techniques are listed here. We have the in-basket test. We have leaderless GD, that is group discussions that takes place. The management games are, large number of management games are there which you are given to play. The individual presentations can be one of the methods, or there can be objective tests on the simulation exercises, and that will be followed by the interviews, which is there in the simulation.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, sorry to interrupt. Sir, for example, if we are given a case study during an interview and they're asked to like solve or provide a solution for the same, so will it fall under work simulation or work sample?
It is work simulation.
So, what is the difference between the two, work simulation and work sample?
See, work sample would be the actual jobs that is given, right? And you have got to perform that physically. But in simulation, you are going to do it on the virtual reality thing. On computers, you will be doing that simulation exercise, right?
Okay,
Different
sir.
options are available. That is there. But normally, there are very close difference between the two. Sometimes we have this
in-basket exercise, for example. Now, what happens that actual work situations that has already, actual decisions that has been taken by the organization in different situations, they give you details on that. They do not tell you what decision was taken, but they give you the details in each cases. You're going to pick up a case, and quickly a team will divide the roles that you are supposed to play, and
quickly prepare and perform that and take a decision which has already been taken earlier. Now you are taking a decision, and then you are interviewed as to why did you take that decision. If you can answer logically why did you take that decision, which may be different, because as the time has changed, the decision will also change, and therefore you have got to logically answer as to why you took decision X or decision Y, what were the variables you considered, and so on and so forth.
so that is the kind of exercises that is there. All these are not given, only one or two of them will be given in typical simulation exercises, because all are different types of simulation exercises as such.
Then we also have got
Thank you, sir.
video-based simulation testing, a situational test comprised of several video scenes, scenarios, each followed by a multiple choice question that requires the candidate to choose from among several courses of action. So alternatives are there. You are supposed to choose the best alternative that is there. While the evidence is mixed, the results suggest that video-based simulation test can be useful for selecting employees. That is there. We also find that now this has become very common today because physical interviews are not taking place. Work simulation, we find that it is the miniature job training and evaluation approach which is also followed. We are not going on to the full-fledged job situation. We are looking at the miniature. Have you heard of prototype? Prototype.
Yes, sir.
This is
referring to that prototype where a smaller version of that is being taken. And if you can perform that well, they explode it to the actual scenario later on, right? So prototype to explosion, that is the concept in system that takes place. We also find that candidates are trained to perform a sample of job tasks and then are evaluated on their performance. Not all, but only on the sample as to how do you perform. The approach assumes that person who demonstrate that he or she can learn and perform the sample task will be able to learn and perform the actual jobs as well. That is the actual scenario that is there. So what happens that these are different types of tests which is being given. Now, one thing that I did not mention as to what is recruitment then, because this was the selection tests. Before I go to the interview part, what is recruitment? We says identifying and attracting. That is the definition we gave in the beginning, right? Now, what happens that once we try and identify as to where are we going to get the employees from? Is it going to be from the open market, or is it going to be internal candidates? Is it going to be from, say, on deputation, whichever, or is it going to be from the external sources, the campus or the open market, whichever? We try and, give an advertisement to that, or send a circular, or send a request. And in response to that advertisement,
In response to that circular, or is in response to the request that is being sent for, deputation postings that is there, we receive the reply in the form of filling up the forms, right? And those forms, the process of identifying, process of developing an ad, process of preparing a circular or preparing an order that we send, and then getting response in response to those advertisement or circular or office orders that we issue, what we call is the process of recruitment. Because once we receive
those applications and we start the scrutiny process, we have basically gone into the selection process, which is basically a process of rejecting the unwanted from the wanted ones,
from the total list of prospective employee who are there, right? Now, once you have gone through the test, when do we decide that a test has to be given? Do we give test in all situations? Answer is no. It will be dependent on the number of applicants. But in Indian scenario, normally test becomes compulsory because we are getting a large number of applicants for a small kind of few jobs which are in question. And therefore, we have got to decide about the
test or batteries of tests that is going to be given. There is no one test which is foolproof, and therefore the test that we receive has got sections of where the questions are being given on different types of tests which are there, and then the details are being measured accordingly as to which section have you performed well and which section you have not performed well. Sometimes it is clearly being divided into section A, B, and C. They say that if you have scored, say, a certain cutoff marks in section A, then only your section B will be checked, because that is the kind of test they try and give. And they further say that if you have scored certain percentage in section B, then your section C will be tested. And if you are consistent with your scores in all sections, then the final score comes up. All those candidates who do not score, their scores will not be there in the list of selected candidates which are there. Now, once we have the score, we find that 95 to 99% of the organizations
world over select employee based on selection test or interview or a combination of both. Therefore, interview also becomes an important part. In some certain cases, only written test will be good enough. But in large number of cases, interview will also form a part of selection process which is there. And therefore, we need to look at what is the selection process that is there.
What is the selection process in terms of interviews? What are different types of interviews that is there?
Are you aware of the interviews? Anybody? Anybody who knows about the interview techniques?
So there are different kinds of rounds, like some means HR round and technical round.
Mm-hmm.
And then if most of the time if applying for a higher position, then the directors will sometimes takes your interview. And on the basis of that, HR tells you whether you are in the firm or not, whether you have they have on board you or not.
Okay, fine. That seems to be.
As well as they ask about your package and how much they can provide. What are their
so this is the overall that you're talking about. Let us go into some details about the interviews. Now, basic features of interviews. An interview is a procedure designed to obtain information from a person through oral responses to oral questions or inquiries, right? This is how we define interview. A procedure designed to obtain information from a person through oral responses to oral inquiries. Because in the examination, a wholesome answer will not be good enough.
Now, what are different types of interview? We say there are selection interviews, there are appraisal interviews, and there are exit interviews. Now, interviews formats can be structured or it can be unstructured, which are there, right?
So, for example, if you look at selection interview, it is a selection procedure designed to predict future job performance on the basis of applicants' oral responses to oral inquiries, with which we are basically concerned here. Then what is appraisal interview? A discussion following a performance appraisal in which supervisor and employee discuss the employee's rating and possible remedial actions. That is appraisal interview, which is not followed in the recruitment and selection process. It is only once you have already joined the organization, your performance appraisal is being done, you are called for discussion, that appraisal interview takes place. Then what is exit interview? An exit interview to elicit information about the job or related matters to the employer, some insight into what is right and what is not right is the thing that we are looking at. Then what would be the formats for interview? We said we have a structured interview or unstructured interview. That is non-directive interviews, as we call it. And a structured conventional style interview in which the interviewer pursues points of interest as they come up in response to questions that is being asked to them by the interviewers. Now, structured or directive interviews can be an interview following a set of sequence of questions which is being asked. The sequence is being maintained, that is there. And therefore, what we find is that it can be situational interview, that is a series of job-related questions that focus on how the candidate should behave
in a given situation.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I'm really sorry once again to interrupt. Sir, I'm not able to get the get an understanding about appraisal and exit interview, like the types of interview you just mentioned.
My dear, look at it. I said selection interview is there for the recruitment and selection process, right? Whereas
Yes.
appraisal and exit interview is not for selection process. It is after you have joined the organization, you are already working in the organization, okay? And basically it is once your appraisal has been done, you are called by the supervisor and boss to discuss as to why your performance has been below par or average, and even if it is higher, why it is higher, what have you done. They would like to gain knowledge. An exit interview, as we said, is to elicit information from them once you are coming out of some jobs, or even you talk about exit polls that takes place, right?
So, okay, sir, thank you. Okay, got it, sir.
Right. Then we have gone to another part where we said that there will be situational interview where a series of job related questions that focus on how the candidate would behave in a given situation, and behavioral interview where a series of job related questions that focus on how
they react to actual situations in the past, that is there. And there can be job related interviews where a series of job related questions that focuses on relevant
past job related behaviors that they are aware about would be asked.
We also find that there can be stress interview, an interview in which the interviewer seeks to make the applicant uncomfortable with occasional rude questions
that supposedly to spot sensitive applicants and those with low or high stress tolerance. Just 1 second, please. I don't know. Yep, I'm sorry, because if you're taking class from home, those hazards are there that you have got to attend to if you are alone. Since there is nobody at home, so I've got to attend to everything, all calls.
Right. There can be this stress interview is an interview in which interviewer seeks to make the applicant uncomfortable with occasional rude questions that supposedly to spot sensitive applicants and those with low or high stress tolerance which are there. See, stress interview is
Basically, artificial stress is introduced. It is not actual stress that is there. They want to know if you break down in a certain situation or you start crying in a certain situation, because in the interviews, if certain questions are asked, awkward questions are asked, sometimes we try and start crying.
Yeah, I tell you, in the interviews, some lady candidate went for interview, and the first question that was asked by the interviewer was a young boy interviewing. He said, "What are your marriage plans?" Right? And the girl, started shouting, how the hell are you concerned with my marriage? Right? And that was the part of stress interview that they were trying to ask as to what are your marriage plans. So an awkward question was asked out of the box, saying that, and the person started crying, although his intention was to ask the person as to how, if there is somebody putting an awkward thing, how do you react to that? A polite answer could have been there. So in the stress questions or any kind of question,
when you are asked in an interview, the first thing is that you must try and be polite and firm. Sometimes they ask you a question
to change the thing, right? They ask you to change a thing. For example, I remember a gentleman was asked that, given a scenario, a boy was asked that you are going through with your sister on a lonely street, and you find that there is some unwanted element came from behind, and he tried and snatched the purse of your sister or dragged your sister along. What would you do then? Will you call the police, or what will you do? So the person said that, look, my immediate reaction would be that I'll look around, and if there is some object, say for example a brick is there, I'll just pick up that brick and hammer the head of that individual. So the person said, say for example, if there is no brick or anything around, would you still change your decision? Would you call police? And that person kept insisting that, he laughed and said, look, you're talking about Indian roads, and which road in India doesn't have the objects around that you won't get it within the shortest possible distance? And he remained firm at the point he was selected. And there was another gentleman asked the same question, and he said he will immediately take out his mobile and call police. How long does police takes to reach this spot? He will dial 100 and get the police. By that time, everything wrong would have happened. So basically, they want how firm you are on your decision, or how well you are, approaching that, which is important. Then there can be puzzle questions. Recruiters for technical, financial, or other types of jobs use questions to pose problems requiring unique out-of-box solutions to see how candidates think under pressure, right? That is there. Then there can be personal or individual interviews, which is unstructured sequential interview, an interview in which interviewer forms an independent opinion about asking different questions, right? And there can be structured sequential interviews, an interview in which applicant is interviewed sequentially by several persons. Each rates the applicant on a standard form. Now, the question that is asked in the sequential interview is a series of direct and indirect questions, right? It is direct and indirect questions that is being asked. So the structured interview will also be including patterned interview, where questions are asked on a definite pattern that is there. And this is normally direct and indirect questions, so that there are certain facts that you have not mentioned on your application blanks, or you have not spoken to, which they want to find out by asking you indirect questions. That is there. Then there are panel interview, an interview in which a group interviewer questions the applicant on different aspects. Now, this panel interview would be the detailed interview that is there, an interview in which a group interviewers questions the applicant, and there can be mass interview as well, where not one but large number of a panel interview, several candidates simultaneously, they are sitting together, and then there are mass interview that takes place, which is there, and you tend to have to answer. You've got to listen to the questions, and they say if one person has not answered, they pass question to another person that you answer as to what it is. Now, there can be computerized interview as well, where an interview in which a job candidate's oral and or computerized replies are obtained in response to computerized oral, visual, or written questions or situations which are given. And the characteristics is it reduces amount of time managers devote to interviewing unacceptable candidates. Applicants are more honest with computers rather than with individuals. They avoid problems of interpersonal interviews, and mechanical nature of computer-aided interview can leave an applicant non-puzzled. Then factors affecting interview, the first thing is the first impression.
Now, we normally say first impression is the last impression. So you must try and present yourself well. That is, give a first impression well. So the tendency for interviewers to jump to conclusions, make snap judgments about candidates during first interview minutes of interview is basically the first impression. Now, negative bias, unfavorable information about an applicant influences interviews more than does positive ones which are there. And we also find that misunderstanding the job can also be there as far as effect of interview. Not knowing precisely what the job entails and what sort of candidate is best suited about interviewers to make decision based on incorrect stereotypes and what the good applicant is. These are the shortcomings of the interviewer, not the candidate. Then candidate order error can also sometimes affect the interview. An error of judgment on the part of the interviewer due to interviewing one or more very good or one or another very bad candidate just before and after the interview in question. So if you are going after one of the best candidates who has been interviewed, then of course, an error is likely to occur when you are going, if they are not very, very objective. Then non-verbal behavior and impression is also important, where interviewers interference of the interviewee's personality from the way he or she acts in interview have large impact on the interviews. And we also find that clever interview attempts to manage
the impression they present to persuade interviewers to view them more favorably is also there. I'll continue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.